Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing well.
Good.
Doing well.
All right.
Ready to solve another problem.
I hope so.
At least the solution, if we get to make our own judgment, we've solved a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But we can't be dishonest to ourselves if we don't. People don't want to be honest with us at all. We need honesty and truth, and that's what we lack. And there are some things here we're going to report on today, and we're going to start off with something that is disgusting.
Yeah.
You know, in the area of justice, and that has to do with the saving of democracy by putting a man away to prison for 8 months and destroyed his life, his family, and the whole works because he walked into the Capitol, took a picture, did no act of violence whatsoever, but he was number one on the list. He was the enemy of the state, had a trial, and a prosecutor, you know, really hit him hard with all his viciousness. So he was destroying the country, and I just want to set the stage by showing a little short statement that the prosecutor said. He said, we had to go after him and put him in jail because he contributed to the collective threat to democracy, according to the prosecutors. And of course, we're talking about January 6th and you know, the insurrection. That was not an insurrection. It was a demonstration without even having guns, except one gun that killed some innocent person that they won't tell us about.
They won't tell
and
us.
Yet they're going to put this man in jail. What's going to happen to the other 500 and so many people? They're all going to be up for trial too. And I have no idea. I can't imagine that there won't be some sort of an appeal on this because of such an outrage. But that's been anticipated, and then it finally was just announced yesterday or the day before. And I think the other thing he did, he didn't go in and take a picture of the police maybe not acting properly. He took a picture of himself.
Yeah, a selfie.
Took a selfie, and he really fits the the definition of a constituent, a citizen with curiosity. There was a demonstration going on, and that's what we were supposed to know was proper, you know, peaceful demonstration. Well, anyway, this is a sad story, and I don't know when it's going to end because it might just be beginning. Because first, we have more people involved, 500 people. How are they going to do it? And the second thing, it's the principle of the thing. And this has nothing to do with justice. Absolutely nothing. This has all to do with politics and power mongering and maneuvering and maybe covering up for some shenanigans in election that they don't really want to talk about what really went on in the election.
Yeah, that's true. And we've always said, you know, the people who committed violence obviously should be prosecuted for committing acts of violence. The people who committed vandalism, well, they should be prosecuted for that. A better idea, probably make them clean it up, you know, be on the work crew. But this is not justice in any way. His name is Paul Hodgkins. He's the first person to be convicted of a felony charge stemming from the insurrection. Interestingly enough, he is not charged with being an insurrectionist. He's not charged with trying to overthrow the country. In fact, what happened is that the Biden Justice Department added felony charges to 200 of these people who have been arrested, calling it obstruction of an official proceeding, because members of Congress were certifying the election at the time that these people came in, apparently. So 200 misdemeanor cases have been added, this felony charge, so that they could get their insurrectionist army, which is what they need. But this is, Hodgkins, a first-time offender. He's never been arrested or charged with any crime. He didn't commit a violent crime. He didn't commit any kind of property crime. As you say, he went in, he stayed in for 11 minutes, he took a selfie in the Senate chamber, and he left. And for that, not only was he sentenced to 8 months in prison, but he's called a terrorist. And thanks again to Julie Kelly, who's been on this show, who is just relentless on this. She really has a nose for justice, and that is a very patriotic thing, I think. But here's what the disgusting, psychotic prosecutor said, and arguing for 18 months in prison for this guy. The need to deter others is especially strong in cases involving domestic terrorism. which the breach of the Capitol certainly was. That's what he said. Moreover, with respect to specific deterrence, courts have recognized that terrorists, even those with no prior criminal behavior, are unique among criminals. Terrorists. He walked in, took a picture of himself. I just can't help thinking that Americans are going to wake up and say, this is a nightmare. This isn't America. This is political justice.
You know, to add to the flames of this disgust that we feel is what's been going on for the past year. And last summer, there was a bit of violence going on, real violence.
Yeah.
People were killed. They were out on the streets, and stores were broken into, robbers out in the open, and the police did nothing, defund the police. And there were some people involved, and they have pictures of them, maybe a couple arrests. And I think they belong to a group called the Antifa and Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
But have we heard of one prosecution going on? I mean, there has to be one or two that went to prison or was prosecuted for this. But that was real violence, and they had real goals, because their real goals is part of the cultural Marxist goals, and that is to tear up the society, to make sure that there's chaos, to prepare the stage for really ushering in, Marxism, which is on the march right now. So, but we hear nothing. So if you talk about an injustice to this one man, that is a horrendous story. But the story is, if they can do it to him, they can do it to the next 500. But also, it doesn't even address, at least in the major media, what about the evidence for the real violators that have been involved in the streets and remain involved? Every weekend there's a lot of shooting and killing. You talk about insurrection and violence. It's out there, and certain groups are involved. But there's no talk of this. But this is the man that's going to be the example, destroy his life, destroy his family's life. And you described exactly what the conditions were. Yeah, he really sounded violent. You know, he could be very easily identified as a citizen that heard there was a function going on and was curious enough to go. But boy, this is really a terrible thing, and most people, thank goodness there are people like Julia that'll go in here and check this out and expose this to a lot more people. But this needs to be continuously analyzed, because this has really been the argument over so many things. This goes back to the argument about even before Trump was elected.
Yeah.
You know, all the lies about the FBI. I mean, these are proven lies.
Yes.
But none of them are prosecuted. But we got him, and we've saved the republic. Except they don't even call it a republic. They don't even pretend. They want pure democracy, which is a little bit different. That means dictatorship of the majority, and we control the majority, so therefore we're the dictators.
Well, Hodgkins embodies everything that the elites of D.C. hate. He's a blue-collar guy. He's a regular guy. Obviously not a man of means. He rode a bus from Florida to D.C. That's how he got there. He didn't fly his private plane. Blue-collar guy, and he loved Trump. Those are all the things that D.C. hates. And let's put up this first clip if we can. This is a picture of him in the Senate chamber holding a Trump flag with a Trump sweater on. This is the dangerous terrorist taking selfies in the Senate. Let's go to the next one. This is our good friend Jim Bovard, who always puts a good point on things. He said, "I'm waiting for the cultural shockwaves when people realize that taking selfies can result in sentencing enhancement," which is exactly what happened. And if we go to the next one, here are a couple things from Julie's article, a couple of quotes that are chilling. First of all, he's up there, Hodgkins is in tears. He realizes his life is over. He's apologizing without a shadow of a doubt. "I'm truly regretful of my actions and the way the country that I love has been hurt." He said he traveled to D.C. alone to support a president I love. And listen what they forced him to do. Then he said the words Joe Biden's Justice Department wanted to hear, words reminiscent of the sort of Soviet-style confessions beat out of political dissidents the world over. He said, "Joseph R. Biden is rightfully and respectfully the President of the United States." But if he thought that would satisfy their desire to destroy him. They were wrong. That didn't help him whatsoever. And let's look at the next one. They asked him, well, what's going to happen now with this jail term? They wanted him for 18 months, and here's what he said. The felony conviction will cost me several of my civil rights. I will lose the job I love. He's an apprentice at work, and he hoped to be promoted to mechanic, but his employer will not be able to keep him on while he's in jail. He also said, I will lose the house I rent, and I have to find a place for my 2 cats. This guy's life is absolutely ruined. He did nothing wrong. It's horrible.
And they brag about this great achievement.
Yeah.
This is a great victory for them.
We took down a terrorist.
And this can go on for years now. They want it out there.
Yeah.
They want it out, and they use it constantly. And guess where the accommodation comes from? It comes from the major media. I mean,
Yeah.
either they totally ignore it, or they would paint him as a bad guy, which is rather sad.
It is, and here's a couple of points. The point that you made earlier, if we can look at this next clip. This is from the summer about the other kinds of approved political riots. This is from The Sun. Escaping justice, hundreds of BLM rioters, looters, and vandals have charges dropped despite destruction from violent protests. They were all let off the hook, and they actually did violence. And we'll all remember this next picture. This was repeated over and over and over and over last summer. This next picture, please. We'll remember this next picture. Police cars burning on fire. Who paid for those? Well, of course we did. And as usual, though, where are the Republicans? Where Trump hasn't said a word in defense of these people. He could have also pardoned them all. Didn't say a word. Where are the Republicans on the Hill? Nobody, everyone is terrified of defending. It now comes down to people like Julie Kelly, a few handful of conservatives, and importantly, Dr. Paul, real honest progressives who believe in civil liberties, like, again, Glenn Greenwald. Let's put up the next clip. I want to read this tweet because it's so important. As usual, he nails the whole thing down, Dr. Paul. He says, it's astonishing how liberals don't recognize the glaring similarities between the rhetoric used to elevate fear levels to usher in the first war on terror and the rhetoric deployed now by the same agencies and pundits to exaggerate January 6th for a new domestic war on terror. At least 9/11 actually entailed a cataclysmic attack, flying 4 gasoline-filled passenger jets into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, with another one likely aimed for Congress, killing thousands. Comparing January 6th to that, or saying January 6th is worse, is literal insanity. And here's the key tweet, Dr. Paul. The reality is liberals want a domestic war on terror. They want the CIA, NSA, and FBI to surveil their political adversaries, arrest them, treat them like terrorists, etc. They want them censored. It's an authoritarian faction that craves that repression. And January 6th is the key to it all.
Boy.
He nailed it. That's what they want.
Right. You know, we've talked a lot about the vaccines, and we're going to continue to talk about the vaccines because that's long-term, it's ongoing. There's always a fight, and right now there's vaccine passport going on, and it's international, and the fighting will continue. And I want to talk a little bit about that. First, one little tidbit here has to do with the Democrats from Texas that we sent to D.C.
Yeah.
Have fun up there.
Yeah.
Okay, they go up there to find harbor and identify with their colleagues or their accomplices. And it says there was a vaccinated Pelosi aide and the White House official. Both had been inaugurated, and they came down with COVID. They welcomed the crowd up there. Oh, that vaccine really must work real good. Oh, those are exceptions to the rule.
Of course.
But then there's this other one I wanted to talk a little bit more about, and that is the identification that the COVID cases are surging in the most vax countries, not in the least vax country. So logic would tell you, well, certainly the country that has the most vaccines, they got them first and early, and that would be the, but it isn't. It's the opposite, and it constantly there's more stories coming up. People who have had all the vaccinations, and it hasn't really satisfied or done the trick. But if you say anything, you're in great danger,
Yeah.
because you'll be in greater danger than if you get the virus. You'll be in danger because they're going to cancel you. You know, and you talk about the gentleman that lost his job, by going to the Capitol. People lose their jobs over this whole issue because they refuse, to be vaccinated. So some of these statistics that came out and said this is a so wonderful thing. There's a lot to continue to look at it for. I'm concerned from a medical viewpoint. Is we know of the shortcomings now. We know that the vaccine was not tested as most vaccines have been tested in the past. And right now you're reading more stories. I'm not making this up. There's more stories, and they're coming from people who are credible, and they're talking about long-term complications, not 3 weeks or 6 weeks, or coming down with a blood dyscrasia, in the first month or so. They're talking about maybe years on out, which is going to be totally unknown at this moment. But I think that this is setting the stage for this, just on how this has been accomplished. And now the people in this country caught on to it, and they refuse to take it. So we're giving the stuff away.
Yeah, literally.
When you get something for free, generally that's what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, something very curious is happening, and people that we watch, like Alex Berenson and others, are noticing it. We don't know what it means. We're not pretending that we have any conclusions about this, but you cannot deny what we're seeing, and it's very interesting. Let's look at this next clip. This is from a mainstream publication in the UK. Most COVID deaths in England are now in the vaccinated. But here's why that shouldn't alarm you. Okay, that's beside the point. And let's look at the next one. This next clip is really interesting because this is a chart. It's a little hard to read, but it says in Europe, if we can move that. In Europe, he said something really odd is going on. In Europe, we are seeing surges at many places where most of the population has already been vaccinated. At the same time, the 15 least vaccinated countries don't seem to face any problem. At some point, denying this problem will get painful. And you have Malta on top, which I believe is nearly 100% vaccinated. The UK and the Netherlands are very, very highly vaccinated. And they're the ones that are having these big surges right now, and nobody really understands it. Let's look at this next tweet. This is an interesting laboratory, Dr. Paul. Gibraltar is fully vaccinated, every eligible citizen, by April. Now, 2.5 months later, they have the third highest per capita rate of infection on Earth, with 80% of cases in the past 2 days being vaccinated. Apparently, 100% vaccination doesn't lead to zero COVID, and that's very fascinating. And one more, actually, and this is Israel, which we've always talked about, unfortunately for Israelis, but they really are a very good laboratory because of how aggressive their vaccination program was. Israel bans entry to vaccinated tourists in an attempt to control their own spiking COVID numbers. And this is from the Jerusalem Post. It's not from some kooky offbeat paper. They're banning vaccinated people because the vaccinated people, they say at least, are spreading the COVID.
You're talking about a screwed up scientific system that's gone on here. It is so bad, but it should have been expected because, a bunch of politicians are involved with making drug companies and vaccine companies very wealthy, and then they call it, if you object to it, you're not a scientist.
Yeah.
These are the only people who continue to do what we've been describing as pretty dumb. That means we're anti-science.
Yeah.
But in another place where they're really anti-science is we talk so much about these dumb things that they're doing with the vaccines, how much political anger there is, no demonstrations. We were excited about, not 100 people or 1,000 or 10,000 people, but 1 million people in France waking up and saying, we want our freedom. So that to me is exciting.
Yes.
But what isn't exciting to me is the pain and the suffering of doing the opposite. They're pushing and demanding and threatening and intimidating people to take the vaccine. You're going to be canceled and all this. If you don't do it, you're going to lose your job. But that is the inability to really have had free access to common sense and take ivermectin if you wanted to, and also hydroxychloroquine. that has been just handicapped. You can't do it. And it'd be great if we had some really, really good studies where there's a society that maybe, and I think there are some out there, where that is essentially what they used. And but they'd be terrified, even if they did find out that to be true, it would be squelched. They're not going to let people know that. You mean we made a mistake on this?
Never.
Then you'd have to decide who's responsible. Let's say that lives would have been saved by many-fold. And we yesterday talked about how the kids, are so much better off not getting it, and the lockdown and things can be very dangerous. Somebody has a moral responsibility, but maybe there should be a legal liability when you think about the exemption that the vaccine companies get and the politicians get, so they can tinker around with all these laws and tinker around with the use of force, mix it up with all kinds of politics, and make a big scandal out of, boy, we got that bad guy out of the Capitol, and he's at least locked up. He's going to learn a lesson, and we're going to teach the people what they have to do, and they have to obey. And that of course is the direction we're moving in, and the direction I'd like to reverse and get people moving in the other direction and let people make up their own minds. People are capable of doing it. They're doing it in spite of all this propaganda the last year and a half. There's people who just said, we don't believe this. And a lot, we've seen them in hospitals and things, but in hospitals, if you don't do it, you lose your job. But there have been a lot of people stand up and say, no, I am not going to take the vaccine, which quite frankly, you make the point all the time that we don't have a monopoly on perfect wisdom on this, but I think common sense would tell us that some of these things that they are doing just doesn't add up. And people ought to have a right to make up their own mind. That's what freedom is supposed to be about. We make our decisions about our own life and our own bodies, not the government, not the bureaucrats, and not the people making money, and not the international health organizations.
And what we always say every time, it's not even really about the vaccine. It's about not being coerced into do something. It's about freedom. So the vaccine is irrelevant. Some may want to, some may not want to, maybe some should. Let's go to the next one again, because I think this curious phenomenon of COVID spreading so much in countries where there's a high level of vaccination is confusing. And I think if we can look at that next clip, no, actually, I think it's before that, isn't it? No, the next one, sorry, the next one. Yeah, sorry. Alex Berenson does a good job because there's basically only two possibilities here, and he makes them. This is for the breakthrough cases. He says, on the one hand, the bull case is sure they don't stop transmission, but they decouple cases from deaths. That is a possibility. And so he says, but if that's true, why push vaccinations on those at low risk? Who cares about the case counts? The elderly are vaccinated and as protected as they can be, so it's over. But on the other hand, the bear case, of course, he said, is that the protection against serious cases and deaths is already dropping and continues to do so. That possibility, which is that the vaccines are very, very short term in the efficacy, and leave that up, please. Because he says if that's the case, if they have a very, very limited efficacy over time, why push anyone to get vaccinated? To buy them 3 months of protection when we don't even know if repeated booster shots will be tolerated? So those are the two possibilities that he puts out, and I think there's a good case that those are the two possibilities. I don't know the answer to them, but it's either way, it's kind of bad news for the people pushing this.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I'm ready to move on to another little item here. We're getting a little bit long-winded, but that's okay.
Hopefully our audience likes it.
No, I want to go on to an article that appeared on Lou's site this morning, I believe, and it caught my attention. And the title of it is, Why Are Soros and Gates Buying COVID Testing Company?
Yeah, that is so weird.
Holy man, what? I thought we weren't going to hear too much from Gates, but he's still around. He still must have a couple dollars left over. And so what I was thinking about is, why are they doing this? And, there is, the possibility that people would invest in a company that makes vaccines under the conditions we have today, especially if it were honest,
Yeah.
and not a government operation. And that it'll be necessary for a company to be very much involved. And Soros and Gates are business people.
Yeah.
So this might be simply, a business transaction, looking at the current events and saying, this is a good place to make some profit. For some reason, I'm rather suspicious of that. I don't think that they're worrying about adding on to their trillion or billions of dollars. And there might be just something else involved here, because they've been involved in, especially Gates has been very much involved in in the manufacturing of vaccines.
Yeah.
But now this is the testing. But this was the biggest deal going. We never believed the test, and most people finally came around to believing that the person who designed the test said, I can make that test say anything you want it to say. So the tests have been totally unreliable, but that was used to terrorize the people. That you talk about terrorizing people, scare them to death, and kids being scared, it's a real shame. So I think it's an interesting point that they're buying this company. Maybe you have the answer for what they're doing.
Well, you do scratch your head because, okay, they might be bad guys, but Soros and Gates are no dummies, right? They're very successful businessmen. How they got it is another story. But you'd think at this stage of the game, the smart business money would not be in investing on further COVID testing, because for all intents and purposes, it looks like this pandemic is petering out. The different variants will be less deadly as we go, as it always happens. So you think, in a way, this is not a great business deal, unless you're wondering, these guys essentially are using their money to bet on long COVID or permanent COVID. Seems like they have something else in mind.
Well, we've been a little bit suspicious of that, because I think their tone is certainly that it's going to be around for a while longer, and they're always looking for the next variant. They can find the variants, but someday they'll admit maybe the variant isn't nearly as dangerous as they are claiming, and maybe there's even a natural benefit to having a variant, and maybe it does contribute to immunity. Certainly the vaccines that have been paid for by the taxpayer doesn't seem to take care of the problems. Even the White House aides and Nancy Pelosi aides didn't get much protection from those vaccines. So ready for the next item?
Yeah,
we
a couple
have
quick
here?
ones here.
Okay, this is politics, and sometimes I get tired of the inside actions of politics, but I think I was involved in politics for a few years. But this one has to do, once again, with honesty about our election. In Arizona, from my view, it looks like there's some people in Arizona that are doing a very sincere effort at trying to dig out the truth about what happened in the last election. And some of these things that they're looking at now and checking out, they say it's really never been done before, because most people accept it. And election corruption's been around for a long time, and all I keep thinking of is, how did LBJ really become a powerful person? Well, it was in 1948. It was Box 13, and everybody in Texas knows about it. And yet, he was a Senate leader. Then he became president of the United States, and then he ended up. Because his policies were so bad, he ended up in pretty dire shape. Matter of fact, I think it led to his death. So, but he. Right now, they're talking about finding enough stuff that there's no way that Trump didn't win Arizona.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because other states may be looking at that. And I think you said before the show, what this means, what concerns you most about this is how these problems can be fixed for the future.
Yeah, because I don't think all of a sudden, let's say they have the evidence. Let's say that Trump's on the right track, and technically he really won. I think the odds of them changing president is just the atmosphere. I mean, I just don't think that's going to happen. But I still support what they're doing.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I mean, right now, even though finding out the truth about LBJ didn't help us a whole lot. They kept doing things because I was a victim of that type of activity in 1976.
Yep.
And so but I think the more we know about it, I think this information is important. It's already being reflected in the various states who are changing their laws and assuming more responsibility.
Yeah.
Because not many people even thought it through. Oh, the courts can't do this, and the Congress can do this, and all. But it's the state legislature that have a lot of clout about having honest elections and telling the country who the electors are. So I think the information gained from this is very important. So I hope they don't quit because they haven't all of a sudden switched presidents here in the next month or two. That's just not likely.
Yeah, if they're worried about people losing faith in democracy, rigged elections are a pretty easy way to have that happen. Our last item is another short one. We can put up that next clip with the read on it. Senate Democrats propose requiring women to register for military draft. Dr. Paul, surely you're in favor of this. This is equality.
That's it. Equality and slavery. Yeah. And that's what this is all about. People should have a right. Excuse me. People should have a right to their life.
Yeah.
We believe that, but that doesn't have much, effect on people when they're writing legislation. And I think of this as a category. We should have our lives are our own, and we should have a right to our bodies and our lives. And this, one thing that I've used as an example is if you have a right to your life, you should have a right to the fruits of your labor. If you have the right to the fruits of your labor, there would be no IRS.
Yeah.
And you'd spend your money the way you want to spend your own money. But so I see that as a threat to a right to your life. But then the draft and the registration or being forced to take a vaccine, you lose that right to your body and to your life. And this is something that the liberals have been wanting to do this forever. I don't think this is all of a sudden going to happen. I think people are going to eventually, the majority of the American people probably are going to be happy with this difference between treating men and women for the military draft. So all of a sudden, therefore, truth and justice and freedom for the women. But I just think that whether it's the vaccination, the draft, or the IRS, I think this is a direct attack on women.
Yeah.
You say we're going to treat you just like men. We're going to send you off to Vietnam, pick up a rifle, and go into the rice paddies or wherever and expose your life and be one of those 68,000 people getting killed in the next war. This is crazy stuff. It means they don't have the vaguest idea what personal liberty is all about, and yet they do that with a straight face. They say we have to do this to equalize things, and the whole thing is, it's almost masochistic. It's usually led by women.
Yeah.
It's if men were doing it, they might say, "Hey, why you want me to go in there?"
Yeah.
But anyway, the radical left is all for that because they're authoritarians, and ultimately they need to be dictatorial, and they need control. And I think that case that we just talked about of the individual going to prison for going to the Capitol, that means you have to have force. You have to use force because, the old saying, truth is treason in an empire of lies. And there's an empire of lies, and if you it's the worst thing you can do is expose the lies of Washington.
Yes.
And this is very, very dangerous. And of course, I think the big issue: how do you define and understand truth, and how do you seek it out? And I'm optimistic. I still believe the majority of Americans want that.
Yeah.
And I think the unfortunate thing is the people who reject the whole notion of truth are the people who want to have equality by saying we're going to draft everybody.
Yeah.
And if vaccines are necessary, by Bill Gates say they're necessary, we have to do what he says. That to me is the opposite of what it would be like to live in a free society.
Well, the sad truth is that in D.C., all parties are the war parties, regardless
Right.
of what. But I'm going to close out here, and let's put up that last clip. I'll just remind people again, we've gotten a lot of response yesterday when I discussed our 2021 Ron Paul Scholars Seminar. It's taking place on September 3rd in Washington, D.C., the day before our conference. It'll be the second time we've done this. You'll see in the photo, these are our scholars from 2019 having lunch with U.S. Representative John Duncan. Had a great conversation. It's a fun day. It's a learning day. It's a chance to interact with people who spent their professional years in foreign affairs with all of the insights that they have. Go to ronpaulinstitute.org. You'll see this in the upper right-hand corner. You can apply there. As I said yesterday, we offer a $500 scholarship, so you can get there, you can get your hotel, you can get some food. It's not going to be any cost to you. Upper division undergrads and grad students, welcome to apply. It's a quick and easy application. Second and final thing, Dr. Paul, I just really want to tell everyone that tickets have sold very quickly. We have less than 40 tickets left. We're up in the 80-85 percentile range of tickets sold. We do have at least one more big speaker announcement that we'll probably make tomorrow. So I would just urge you to get your tickets today. I've looked at every way of expanding the room if it does sell out as soon as this week, which I expect. There really isn't any way to do that. And I don't know that we'd want to, and as I wrote in a letter, Dr. Paul, what we have in that room is about the right size, where you can still feel like you're among friends, but it's not a tiny little gathering. I think it's a happy medium. So
very good. I want to once again thank our viewers for tuning in today, and hope you returned on a regular basis to the Liberty Report. I want to just close out by just making a point of how I try to analyze things that are going on. And I do think that the culture of Marxists is a very, very real entity. And to me, it's their second chance at it. The first chance they had at Marxism was back in the 19th century and the 18th century when it first started. But I always thought the 20th century sort of wiped it out. You know, the authoritarians, you know, the Hitlers and the Mussolinis and Stalin. And after 1989, that was over and done with. But no, it's alive and well because it stayed alive and was nourished in our universities, which defied, I think, the common sense of the people, because I still believe that the people still would prefer to live in a peaceful world that's more prosperous and not go along. But anyway, it's alive and well, and they're still promoting it. And their main goal and the main way that they think they can win is have chaos in the streets. And we today just talked about the chaos in the streets, whether you know, it's with COVID and the economic condition. It's there. But that is all beneficial to those who would say, see, freedom doesn't work. Capitalism doesn't work, and it's all a result of that. So that's why we really need to do a better job in promoting Marxism this time. And they believe this. So, and I believe also sincerely that the majority of the American people, if they have a choice and know the difference, that we should challenge those individuals who are a small minority who get control of power and money, and then they are the ones that dictate it. This lockdown is really a sort of a climax to at least 50 years of it, but I hope that ends, you know, and changes so that the chaos that we have and the lockdown and the attack on our liberties, that we can reverse that. And I don't think it's that complicated. It just means that people have to say, you know, I'm responsible for my life. I believe in freedom. I don't think that we should ever initiate aggression against another person. And if you own something, it's yours. And the only way you can get rid of it is through a voluntary arrangement. Voluntarism is a great word to use if you're looking for a description. It has nothing to do with having 300,000-400,000 federal bureaucrats with guns enforcing, you know, their ideal society that they want. As long as they need guns to run an organization or run a country, it's not going to work. And that's why this whole thing on the COVID thing didn't work, because that's exactly the tools that they used, and they forgot about protecting that liberty of letting the individual decide whether or not they want to use hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. That can be narrowed down to that. Freedom of choice and voluntarism would solve a lot of our problems, and it would be not un-American in any way, because the founders had pretty strong feelings in that direction. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.